Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Dead Poet Discourses Podcast, a lo-fi, low-budget, but never low-effort podcast hosted by yours truly, Another Dead Poet. Today we'll be discussing how art and the process of psychological and spiritual healing inform one another by examining the works of two of my favorite musicians working today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, this is episode 1 of Dead Poet Discourses, Kendrick Lamar, MIKE, and the Art of Healing. Kendrick Lamar's fifth full-length studio album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, released in 2022, is undoubtedly the most polarizing record in his discography. While still critically acclaimed and commercially successful, the double LP wasn't immediately heralded as an all-time classic like To Pimp a Butterfly, nor was it the chart-dominating, platinum plaque accumulating smash of his prior album, Damn. Sure, it was a Kendrick Lamar album, so it was obviously incredibly performed, virtuosically written, and sonically experimental, but the immediate response to the record felt muted, as if people weren't quite sure what to make of it. This was no epic jazz excavation of societal ills and personal turmoils, and it was certainly not chocked full of pop-leaning bangers. No, Mr. Morale was something far more unwieldy, jagged, and unflattering. Mr. Morale documents the psychological and spiritual journey of a man learning to come to terms with the traumas, angers, and vices that grew to define him. Over the course of 73 minutes, the greatest rapper alive purged himself of all the evils that had ailed him. Sex addiction, infidelity, racism, grief, and generational cycles of abuse and victimization are all cathartically called by their name before being vanquished and rid from his life forever. At the end of the heartbreaking Mother I Sober, in which Kendrick details the manifold ways that sexual and physical abuse manifested around him as a child and the impacts these experiences had on him growing into adulthood, all of Kendrick's pain and his struggles to save himself are validated by the people who it impacts the most, his children. Accompanied by their mother, Kendrick's kids thank their father for breaking the cycles that have defined his life, for giving them a life free from these sorrows, for saving them in the process of saving himself. On the album closer, Mirrors, Kendrick tells us that he has to choose himself. He has to turn his back on the culture that has been his lifeline for so long, and he has to choose himself for the lives he has to shape. He cannot save us. And for this self-preserving act, he cannot help but feel the need to apologize to us. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is not my favorite Kendrick record, nor would I call it his best, but it is the one that personally impacts me the most. The album was released during a time when I myself was embarking on my own journey of recovery. Roughly a year prior, I found myself in the darkest period of my life, as the pandemic and the isolation and fear it caused exacerbated pre-existing issues with obsessive-compulsive disorder, social anxiety, and severe depression to a point of critical mass. In May of 2021, I was prepared to take my own life. The plan was in place, the note had been drafted in my mind, and all that was left to do was take action. I was mere hours away from a suicide attempt before I decided to attend a therapy session I had planned to skip. And thankfully, my attentive and intuitive therapist noticed what was going on and saved my life. To him, I owe a debt of gratitude that I can never repay. A year later, I had fully dedicated myself to the process of undoing the damage and harm that my mind had inflicted upon itself. I was grappling with the root causes of my afflictions, processing traumas long repressed, soothing the shame and guilt that came along with these wounds, and diving headlong into meditation and mindfulness practice. But most importantly, through therapy and meditation, I was accepting accountability for the ways my own behaviors contributed to my misery, the ways I was causing my own suffering, and, in turn, unwittingly causing others around me to suffer as well. It was a difficult concept to stomach, but it is the aspect of my healing process that I would say has contributed most to the fact that I am still here today, writing and sharing these words with you. It caused me to totally rethink and reframe my relationship with myself and my relationship with others, and continues to help me show up and be present for those around me. It was in this context that I first heard and resonated with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, an album so unflinching, ugly, and discomforting in its artistic rendering of the therapeutic process that Tyler, the Creator, famously described the experience of listening to the album as Kendrick Lamar staring at you for almost an hour and 15 minutes. It is an unnerving but deeply beautiful and rewarding album. It is a record that asks you to stomach its moments of anguish and sorrow, asks you to watch one of the world's greatest living artists self-flagellate and deface the very concept of himself that has been built and promulgated by the media and his admirers, all in exchange for glimpses of the serenity and peace that Kendrick has won for himself and his family. And this album, at this particular time in my life, flattened me like a bulldozer. To see an artist I admire so greatly undertake such an arduous transformation blew my mind and emboldened me to go deeper, to keep walking the path of change, no matter how terrifying or difficult it got, and to create a better future for myself and those I cared about. It was a moment where everything seemed to align perfectly, and the proverbial winds seemed to be at my back. It is a time that I look back on as immensely important, and I am grateful for this album and the heart and soul Kendrick Lamar poured into it. However, looking back on this record in 2025, there is, for me, a dissonance, a haze of unreality that infects its story of personal and spiritual maturation. The man who decided to turn his back on the world at large to nourish his soul and to dedicate himself to his family, the same rapper who explicitly and apologetically told the world he would not be their savior, spent the entirety of 2024 waging a crusade for hip-hop culture against the evil of Drake and his OVO stooges, destroying the Canadian pop megastar in one of the most lopsided rap battles in recent history. Then, he dropped the most radio-friendly record of his career and, as a victory lap, performed tracks from said album at the fucking Super Bowl. Now, GNX, the aforementioned radio-friendly record, is, to be clear, a phenomenal album. And the rap battle between him and Drake was likely the defining pop cultural event of 2024, one that caused many to deeply consider what hip-hop culture is, what it ought to be, and who should govern the culture under this newly defined paradigm. But throughout this period, I kept coming back to Mr. Morale, its neatly defined story of healing and redemption, and ask myself, are all of these actions indicative of the man portrayed on that album? I think an argument could be made for both yes and no. But the point remains that the perfect resolution of Mr. Morale's narrative felt more and more ridiculous with each passing day. Human beings are imperfect and contradictory, fated to an absurd existence that seems to defy logic and cohesion, even though we continuously struggle to fit our experiences into stories that are defined by both. It is not with any negativity that I point out these contradictions. Kendrick is a master storyteller, and Mr. Morale is just another example of that fact. Yet, the caveat with all the narratives, myths, and stories we tell ourselves and others to help us make sense of the world we inhabit and our place in it is that narrative always occludes elements of the truth. Based on the storyteller's limited perspective, certain occurrences, patterns, and themes will be highlighted and given importance, while others, often equally truthful and valid, are pushed to the side, ignored, or even decried as fallacious. Using more academic language, our epistemic context, the attitudes, assumptions, beliefs, experiences, preferences, and ideals we hold within us at all time, defines and determines the narratives of the world that we can both craft and interpret as consistent with reality. From one vantage point, a story resonates with the timbre of metaphysical truth. From another perspective, the same story is a revolting bastardization of the real. Stories, no matter how beautifully and coherently constructed, always fail to capture the full breadth and scope of the matter at hand. And this is precisely my point. Trying to capture the therapeutic/healing process in a structured narrative, particularly one that sticks the landing as perfectly as this one does, distorts and eclipses the reality of the process, because, in real life, the healing process never ends. There is no point where you have vanquished all your demons, where you have exorcised yourself of all the darkness you contain, where you cease being the person you once were. The past is you. It seeps into your present and plays a role in shaping your future. The journey of recovery is one of repetition, of cycles. It is a quest filled with major triumphs that seem insubstantial and minor setbacks that feel cataclysmic. And I know this firsthand because I live it every day. And I believe that Kendrick knows this too. I believe he feels the struggle deeply and is aware of the imperfect, iterative, and interminable process of becoming oneself. Mr. Morale is not an artistic failure for being unable to capture this facet of the journey. Mr. Morale is the result of a master artist's ambition and talent being manifested so magnificently that it cannot help but block out reality. It is still a great achievement, but even for all its warts and war wounds, it is still too pristine to capture the path of self-actualization. And this leads us to the question, can art truly depict the path of growth and recovery? And if so, what does it look like? Enter Michael Jordan Bonema, better known by his stage name Mike and his production alias DJ Black Power, and his 2025 LP Showbiz. In stark contrast to Mr. Morale's dynamic vocal performances, bombastic production, and novelistic psychodramas, Showbiz is, on first impression, understated and unassuming in every possible manner. From the early moments of album opener Bear Trap, Mike sets the tone for the entire album to come. Shimmering keys, woozy synth pads, thick analog bass lines, saxophone and flute embellishments, minimalist drum beats, and glitchy, chopped vocal samples form a foggy vortex that swirls softly around Mike's deep, monotonous voice and impeccably steady flows. Additionally, songs are brief, often clocking in at less than 2 minutes, and containing only one verse and maybe a chorus that appears at the beginning and end of the song. Tracks begin and exist for mere moments before fading and folding into the current of ever-changing musical ideas and motifs. And at the center of it all stands Mike, delivering verses defined by abstraction and impressionistic accounts of his day-to-day life as a working musician who spends his days writing and recording, performing concerts, trying to balance his work with his obligations to family and friends, and finding some time to drink, smoke, and occasionally flex on his haters. It is a decidedly soft-focus approach to both production and songwriting. In fact, the record is so softly focused and understated that, for first-time Mike listeners, it might seem to be about nothing. The album is pleasant and highly listenable, the beats provide great vibes and head-nodding groove, and Mike's flows are hypnotic and find pockets that complement each instrumental perfectly and add to the overall impact of each track greatly, his voice serving as the instrument that enhances and unites each element of the composition to its true potential. The record seems designed to maximize replayability, giving listeners a highly concentrated dose of jazzy, soulful, hip-hop bliss while demanding absolutely nothing in return. It is, on initial encounter, a great record, but one that doesn't attain the dramatic depths and cinematic highs of a truly incredible piece of art like Mr. Morale in The Big Steppers. But then you listen again, and then again, and again, and then something, perhaps only a single line or maybe a couplet or two, reaches out and strikes you, and the entire facade of Showbiz is shattered. Take the string of lines from album opener Bear Trap, for instance. That sour taste, bitter, how I mourn best. I'm down to take a trip, but I'm a tour vet. Keep it close, I'm down to wait a bit inside of torment. Sleeve of smoke, I try and gain my spirit, make it storm less. On the first listen, or maybe even the first few, You may have been too intoxicated by the track's smoky jazz club atmosphere, subtle groove, and Mike's effortlessly tight flow to really register the minute details. But eventually, finally, it becomes undeniably apparent that this young man is rapping his ass off. The way he links multiple rhyme schemes across each line, the virtuosic use of mosaic and multisyllabic rhymes, the imagery and alliteration of the phrase sleeve of smoke. This is writing and performing at the highest level, and I will throw hands with anyone foolish enough to disagree. Sorry, back to the, lost the plot there for a second. Let's get back to it. But for our purposes, the important aspect of Mike's lyricism is the subject matter. In 4 bars, Mike paints an abstract but clear portrait of grief. Its bitterness, the torment, the turbulence that characterizes loss, regret, and despair, the way it envelops us and chokes the air from our lungs. But these descriptions of bitterness and smoke are also double entendres, pointing towards a dependency on substances to weather the onslaught of negative emotions. They show that the MC is introspective and able to understand his ailments, but still in a place where he feels the need to look to external sources to cope with them. However, I'm down to wait a bit inside of torment suggests a willingness to truly sit with the emotions that plague him, an understanding that the only way out of tough times is to stay within oneself, and a commitment to mindfulness. What we are presented with in this short excerpt is attention. 2 images of a young man that seem to be at odds with one another. One of a man who is unable to deal with the hardships life has presented him without the aid of smoking and drinking, and one of an individual who has the resolve to face them head-on with a clear mind and soul and possesses an understanding that this is the only way to truly grow and heal. They are 2 seemingly incompatible portraits, yet Mike presents them both matter-of-factly, and also never does anything to resolve this tension between them, as he continues his verse with the same confident and clear-eyed delivery until the song dissolves into an outro and then fades away for good. And this tension persists throughout Showbiz, an album that could be considered a loosely defined concept album about Mike's relationship to both the music industry and his position as a worker within it, but primarily the album is about the psychological and spiritual struggle of Mike, and this tension that defines the plight. Didn't mean to rhyme, sorry about that. And through this refusal to resolve this tension, we are made to realize something. These 2 images are not mutually exclusive. They coexist quite comfortably, ebbing and flowing around and into one another, each hard-fought gem of wisdom coming not at the dispelling or vanquishing of the negativity and darkness, but by existing within it and embracing the fact that mistakes will be made, stumbles will inevitably occur. Mike's substance use or materialism or bouts of self-aggrandizing bravado are not contradictions to the image of him as a man walking the path of enlightenment. They are the necessary imperfections that remind him and us of his humanity. To grow and heal is not to transcend all suffering, to wash out the darkness in eternal light, to rid yourself of all impurities. It is to acknowledge and accept that as human beings, we exist within constant points of tension, dissonance, and incongruity. It is to understand that our blemishes and rough patches, the suffering we have endured, are not objects of scorn or shame, but the very things that make us alive and define the state and act of being. Yes, meaningful growth and change are possible, healing and understanding can be attained, and a greater sense of harmony can be achieved, but we can never truly rid ourselves of the dissonance that defines existence. We must embrace it to truly be. Through an embracing of the inherent tensions that define the human condition, and by packaging them in such a matter-of-fact, understated manner, Mike's Showbiz is able to accurately and beautifully render the reality of the healing process. It is not with bombast and grand sweeping gestures that we truly change ourselves, but with the simple and sometimes imperceptible act of trying to embody the person we want to be every single day. But if you're familiar with Mike's discography, you know that this capturing of the healing process isn't simply a characteristic of Showbiz. Mike has dedicated his entire career to this endeavor. Despite much growth as a writer, performer, and producer since his earliest projects, despite subtle yet impactful variations to production style, and despite his continued ascendancy amongst the ranks of the underground hip-hop scene, Mike has held steadfast to his simple yet profound documentation of his day-to-day journey along the path of self-actualization. It is truly not an overstatement to describe his complete discography as a solo artist up to this point as an eloquently constructed diary chronicling Mike's process of growth and healing. It is a manifestation of the moment-to-moment commitment that is necessary to become the absolute best versions of ourselves. And it is a truly stunning body of work. Again, in stark contrast, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers feels, in the context of Kendrick Lamar's discography, like a bit of an anomaly. Kendrick has certainly discussed his upbringing and mental health struggles on earlier albums. I mean, hell, Good Kid, Mad City is a fictionalized retelling of a day in the life of young Kendrick taking an odyssey through his hometown of Compton with a group of friends. And on To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick explicitly delves into his suicidal thoughts and issues with imposter syndrome on the harrowing You. But Mr. Morale is not just a simple expression of these themes. It is a plumbing of the psyche of one of hip-hop's all-time great artists, an uncompromising and cathartic expression of griefs, addictions, and demons that have haunted one of modern pop culture's most important and influential figures since his childhood. I will say it again, it is a phenomenal record. But, again, particularly after the beef with Drake and the release of GNX, it became increasingly apparent that Mr. Morale was, in many ways, just an era of Kendrick Lamar's career. Pop stars, particularly someone such as Taylor Swift, I think even The Weeknd, you could argue, has done this a little bit. There are others as well, but primarily Taylor Swift, have popularized the concept of each album being a self-contained era of their career, a reinvention and rebranding of an artist the public has come to know and love. It is inherently a grand gesture, one that introduces a new iteration of or a complete deconstruction of the artist's persona, and Mr. Morale is certainly an exemplary entry into the latter canon. It presents listeners and followers of hip-hop culture with a radically altered view of the public persona of Kendrick Lamar, complete with new creative sensibilities, exciting new visual aesthetics, and a glimpse behind the mask of K-Dot, peeling back the fabricated facade and revealing the true Kendrick Lamar Duckworth, the man behind the legend. It was the turning of a new leaf, and showcased a new direction for an artist at the peak of their powers. But as with all pop star eras, the teleological promise is present but unacknowledged from the very beginning. This will not last. This is not a change that will carry forward. So if you don't like it, have no fear. Something different will take its place the next time around. Didn't enjoy the emotional bloodletting of Mr. Morale? No problem. The West Coast flavored bangers of GNX will surely wash that sour taste right out of your mouth. It seems wrong, really nearly insulting, to describe an album as intricately constructed as Mr. Morale as simply an era of Kendrick Lamar's career. An album filled with so much pain and anguish, so much introspection and triumph, as a simple stop on the roller coaster ride that is Kendrick's career in mainstream music. But, given his grandiose stature in the contemporary landscape of popular music, this contextualization, this warped perspective is, on a macro scale, unavoidable. It is simply another entry into his decorated discography, one marked by platinum plaques, Grammy Awards, and a groundbreaking Pulitzer Prize. It is another grand spectacle of artistic brilliance by a man who has become synonymous with such brilliance. Where Kendrick's ability to perfectly capture the process of healing was distorted by the precision and deftness of his artistic abilities on the level of a single album, his ability to manifest this process across his discography has been undermined by the sheer gravity of his position in popular culture. Mr. Morale, the deeply personal statement of recovery and redemption, is functionally another mass media spectacle, another pop cultural phenomenon meant to be consumed, discussed, and ultimately discarded until the next new and shiny thing emerges to take its place. This great work of art is rendered hollow and impotent by the very modes of cultural production that brought it and its creator to light in the first place. This is ultimately the story of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. But if you might recall, I myself earlier said that narratives serve to occlude the truth, to block certain aspects in the service of highlighting others. This story I have developed is no exception to the rule. And in forming the above narrative about Kendrick Lamar's career and Mr. Morale's place in it, I have failed to form another, equally valid and equally intriguing narrative. Kendrick Lamar's career does indeed model the process of growth and self-discovery because it is a career defined by a constant reframing and redefining of the self. Each record shows Kendrick, the artist, exploring a different side of himself, playing with different roles and lenses with which to observe the world, delving into various modes of being, and bringing immense levels of vivacity and imagination to each. Kendrick's career tells the story of a man who is endlessly curious about the world he inhabits and the way he inhabits himself, and each album is a moment where he reaches out to the world to share what he finds fascinating and important at a given moment. It is a capturing of a moment of revelation about the nature of our reality, and a gifting of said revelation to us from one of the most immensely talented creatives of the 21st century. Whether it be the ethnography of Compton, California, captured on Good Kid, the social, political, and cultural commentaries of To Pimp a Butterfly, or the therapeutic and spiritual insights of Mr. Morale, Kendrick Lamar is a human being that is always looking, learning, observing, and working to not only heal himself, but the world around him, and his art truly does, by presenting pristine and magnificent works of astounding depth and beauty, capture the healing process. It captures those moments when all of the hard work and effort you have put into bettering yourself miraculously crystallize and present you with undeniable evidence that you have, in fact, grown. So you might now be asking yourself, hey, Dead Poet guy, what the hell was the point of literally all of this if you were just going to undercut your thesis and make a fool of yourself in front of the whole world, or the 7 people who will listen to this, you goddamn fucking idiot? And to that, I would say that this is the point. Kendrick Lamar and Mike both exemplify the process of growth, healing, and self-discovery, and we stand to learn a lot from both of them by synthesizing the lessons their creativity teaches us. If you are like me and are going to therapy regularly, journaling, meditating, exercising, creating, and just generally trying to dedicate yourself to walking the path of healing, you probably have experienced a moment, or hopefully moments, of immense clarity. Perhaps it was something your therapist said that struck you and changed your perspective on the way you conceptualize yourself and the world. Maybe you wrote a poem that, upon completion, felt so perfectly realized that it made you light up with a nearly indescribable mixture of joy and relief. Or it could be something as simple as going on a walk around your neighborhood, feeling the air on your skin and noticing the breath entering and exiting your body. And for a fleeting moment, you feel that all of life has reason to it. That even in the most mundane settings, there is an incredible, fathomless wellspring of being itself that informs every movement of every particle of every organism and every object. Kendrick Lamar and his spectacular, immense, and magnificent works teach us that these moments are true. They are real. He teaches us to cherish these glimpses of divine serenity and clarity, and, even more importantly, to share them with others for their benefit. He teaches us that the sublime and awesome are actuality. But, if you're also like me, life, much more often than not, feels muddled. It feels out of focus, confusing, and disorienting. Wandering through this nebulous condition, you are often reminded of your smallness, your shortcomings, your past mistakes, your current afflictions, and a myriad other less than pleasant things. Sometimes you feel isolated, alienated, even forsaken or cursed to an existence that is far less than what life ought to be. You may ask yourself, if I am truly a free being, why are there so many systems and external machinations that seem designed to cage me in and hold me back? You may then turn to a scarier thought. I am free, and my feelings of being trapped are my own doing. They are my fault. I am the problem. I am responsible for my dissatisfaction with my life. Then your mind wanders further, and you start to feel hopeless, doomed, trapped in cycles and patterns outside of your understanding and control, even though you are the very thing that gives those cycles and patterns life. You grow depressed and anxious. You wander through a fog, desperate for an opening, a clearing. You seek only the next epiphany or moment of illumination that will make all of this suffering meaningful, even in some meager way. So you work on yourself. You grit your teeth, and do all the things you're supposed to do. And because, as Kendrick has shown us, these moments are real, we eventually find them. And we hope that this time we are fixed, cured, or reborn. But we know that is a lie, and that the darkness and discomfort await our return. We know we will once again go through hell to see a brief glimpse of the light of heaven. But it doesn't have to be this way. No, it shouldn't be this way. The process of growth should be pleasant, despite the imperfections and bumps that define the path we travel. It is something that should bring us peace, solace, a sense of grounding. We should be present and lucid. We should put effort into our trek, but we should also happily understand that our rate of progress is not steady, that sometimes we will simply need to stop and rest, and that many times we will need to retrace our steps to learn something we missed the first go-around. In short, we should learn to find joy in the uninspiring, basic moments that make up the bulk of our lives. We should learn to see the beauty that lies in the unassuming. And this is the wisdom that Mike Showbiz and his entire discography gifts us with and insistently reminds us of. Gray skies and choppy waters are inevitable. Some days will feel tedious and some nights interminable, but through it all, we should be contented and pleased by the simple fact that we are alive, that we are surrounded by life at all times, and that if we repose our weary spirits upon this tapestry of interconnected being that flows around us, we will see that life is always beautiful and always worth living, as long as we make the simple decision to keep living it. We are given the gift of being. We have had the breath of life breathed into our lungs. We have the opportunity to be. And this simple, unstated, and underappreciated fact is all that we need, is the only thing that we need to embrace, to grow, to heal, and to step into our true selves. We are. And that is a miracle to behold in itself. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed creating it and recording it. It was a very scary process for me. As I mentioned, a bit of an anxious guy, so this is a little out of my comfort zone, but I do really appreciate just having the opportunity to talk to you about this and this art that really means a whole lot to me. If you could like or subscribe or share it with a friend that you think might be touched by this or find this interesting, I would really appreciate that. And I hope to be sharing more work with you in the future. So thank you again. This has been Dead Poet Discourses, the first episode. Kendrick Lamar, MIKE, and the Art of Healing. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.